Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, M&T Bank, Genova Burns. Additional support is provided by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, Connect One Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, New Banks, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, The Moynihan Group, and These Friends.
Bensonhurst, Bay Parkway, 81st Street. Armenia, New York? Camps. Doing, filling groceries over there. Nah, I'm going to go to Manhattan College. Nah, I don't want to go to Manhattan College. I want to go to Fordham University. Fordham University continues, works for the Urban Fellows Program, works with Koch. Then he says, Union Square. Union Square in 1989, it was the pits. After Union Square, I'm going to go there with a guy from Bank of America. I'm going to go to Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte, North Carolina. Maybe I'll come back to New York. Maybe Mike Bloomberg needs somebody for the small business services. 12 years over there. And now, Baruch College. What a better place. I have Rob Walsh. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much. What an introduction.
So tell me about 1837. We have this proclamation. The Walshes arrived from what, Belfast?
Belfast, yep.
So tell me about that.
Those are my great-grandfather is from Belfast, and my great-grandmother came to New York City. It's hard to believe they settled in right outside of Union Square on 17th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue.
What did great-grandpa do?
Great-grandpa, he was a laborer. That's the best I can from the census tracts.
So that was great-grandpa on that side. Then grandpa he worked in the Navy Yard, right?
He worked in the Navy Yard, that's correct.
The Walshes got married to a Sicilian.
That's right, Tominellis.
Okay, and when did the Sicilians come over to New York?
They came in the 1900s. They came in a little later than the Irish.
And grandpa was a barber.
He was a barber off 86th Street.
Okay, I remember Mario, who I used to go on Avenue X, but I never knew what the barbers did in the back room. I think it was the numbers that the barbers used to have also.
I never met my grandfather. He passed before I was born, but I don't know if he had a numbers game there.
No, it wasn't his, but they were paying for the rent of it. There's a form of getting the rent. So how did Dad meet Mom?
Wow, that's a great story. My dad came back from the military. He was in World War II. And his family settled in Garrison Beach after living in Flatbush and went to a dance at a volunteer fire department that still exists in Garrison Beach. They still have volunteer fire departments in Garrison Beach. And that's where he met my mom.
Your dad, you told me, he joined the military, and until recently, you never really knew about his military career and Japan and the Pacific, and even later on, so tell me about that.
You know, Tom Brokaw and others have referred as the greatest generation. And my dad was one of those who, when he came back from the war, he put everything in a box, literally a box, a brown box, his discharge, his dog tags, everything else, and hid it away. And it wasn't until recently, 4 years ago, he was having a conversation with my then 8-year-old son about the war. He was in the living room of his house. I was in the other room, and I'm hearing this story, a powerful story of him being parachuted behind enemy lines. And I said to him, Dad, why don't you get your medals? Purple Heart, all the medals that you got, why don't you get that? And he ended up applying for the medals. He had so many of them that they recognized him at the FDR Presidential Library. And it was just so powerful. And this is what it was about for many veterans, you know, coming home from World War II. Put it behind, not talk about it, raise the family. It's not about me, it's about you. And that's how we grew up, never hearing a story about the war.
So when he comes back, he becomes a commercial artist, you said.
He does. He becomes a commercial artist, a small business owner. Starts his business, raises a family.
Now, where did he operate the business out of?
A number of different studios. He bounced around, and then I can remember as a kid him having studios in brownstones in Midtown Manhattan. I can remember East 51st Street, you know, just right near St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Now, you're born in Brooklyn, right?
Yes.
Now, in a house where a lot of members of the family used to live, right?
Not only us, and I'm one of 7, right? 7 kids. We also had Grandma Tominelli that lived on the top floor. So we all lived in this big old house that still exists on 81st Street between Bay Parkway and 23rd.
So tell me about growing up in Brooklyn and then how you get to Armenia.
Yeah, I have great memories growing up in Brooklyn. Stickball Park.
Yeah, I have that picture of you playing baseball.
In a big old uniform, and
right.
Going to St. Mary's school around the block. Friends. We had a big old backyard. Ball games with my dad. I just have wonderful memories. My brothers and sisters, all together at different events, and it was great going to the pizza place on 86th Street, or it was just a great memory. And then we always had a house, a country house, up in Armenia, New York, and at that time a major dairy farm, real country, if you will. And my dad comes home one day and basically tells us, and I'm almost a teenager or teenager, and says we're moving up. I'm packing it in, and we're gonna move upstate to Armenia. Now at that point, a number of my older brothers and sisters were out of the house; they were at college. So it was me and my younger brother and sister, and we all went up to Armenia, New York, at a smaller school in the country house that we ended up expanding.
Look, at least over there you were able to be on the teams.
That's
it was
right.
smaller.
They needed somebody.
Okay, they needed somebody. You could be running track.
I did.
Okay, and then there was baseball, there was basketball. There were all these things that you had the
wonderful.
opportunity.
It was at the time a major change in my life. I often kidded that I was a year away from a gold chain, but around my neck. But it was a changing part for me. I got very involved in the community. As you mentioned, I played sports. I did well in school. There was a lot of activities for me to engage in, and I think if I look back at those years, it was where I got my thirst for community and development and making places better.
So when you graduated high school, how did you decide originally to go to Manhattan College?
A lot of peer pressure. My brother was a Jasper, graduated from Manhattan. He used to indoctrinate me with Manhattan Fordham basketball games, and we'd go down to the Garden and make trips, and that was wonderful. Great education. I really loved it. The issue for me of transferring from Manhattan College to Fordham was Fordham had a larger government and political science department. And, I really struggled over that. It was, because there were such rivals in the Bronx.
No question. And no question that Fordham, you even learned about the Fordham Road, which gave you a great experience later on in your career.
Sure did.
Okay, because as when I visit Fordham University, it's right on Fordham Road. It's in the heart of the retail district. It's right near everything.
What a tremendous contrast between going to school in Riverdale and then to Fordham Road. And I lived off campus.
People don't consider Riverdale the Bronx. That's part of the
Some people say it floated off Westchester
That's
and
right.
came down. It's a beautiful place and great school.
So you graduate Fordham, undergraduate. How did you decide to continue on for your graduate degree?
Well, I graduated Fordham, and I remember being in the political science department one day, and there was this flyer talking about a fellowship program in the Koch administration. And they picked 20 people nationwide, a long application process and essays and recommendations. And I said, let me take a shot at this. And I applied for it. Fortunately, I got in. I worked in a city agency at a high level at the Department of General Services with a dynamic young commissioner who gave me a great experience. And I stayed on. I stayed on in the Koch administration after that. And I did my graduate degree at night. I would take the train up, the D train, up to the Bronx and finish my degree.
So then what happens?
I was in the Koch administration till '89. And the Koch administration is over, or about to be over. It's the spring. The elections didn't happen. And I, basically was looking at other things. And I got approached by the president of the New School about coming up and running what was then a small local development corporation led by Con Edison, led by the New School, led
Called
by
the
Guardian
Union
Life.
Square.
Now the Union Square Partnership.
Right.
And, at the time, there was a lot of disinvestment.
Right. Union Square in the late 80s was not a place that people, the park was infested with drugs. It was difficult, as you were telling me, to get related companies to say, we'll get a Barnes & Noble bookstore. Mays was on the rear of its side. S. Klein wasn't really doing well. So the great resurgence for the old Union Square was really in pity.
It was a very difficult time. And, at the same time, I looked at it as an amazing challenge. You had people who were visionary. You had people taking chances. Danny Meyer just set up his restaurant. It's hard to believe that. Ken Giddon from Rothman's took over his grandfather's clothing store, moved it to Union Square. Those people that were risk takers, entrepreneurs, ended up coming to Union Square, rolling up their sleeves and saying we could end up making it better. They formed the farmers market. They came up with plans to improve the park. They stuck their stake in the ground and said, we could end up doing. And it was probably, if I look back at my career, the most inspiring time, the most challenging, the most heartbreaking times at times. There were still murders in the park. The crack epidemic was in full blown, throughout the park. But boy, I woke up every day and said, how do we end up making this better? With this powerful team that was committed to making things happen.
So what happens? You get a phone call from one day. I mean, you grew up in Brooklyn, then Armenia. You were back in Brooklyn. No, you were living in Stuyvesant Town, and now you get a phone call to go to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah.
What? Were the Hornets there already?
The Hornets were playing out in the Parkway. And I remember telling the headhunter that he must have been drinking his bathwater that morning because I'm never going to leave New York. And I, in my best of Brooklyn accent, said to them, humor me.
So you went down there.
I went down.
And you meet this small guy who's running a little bank called Bank of America out of Charlotte, North Carolina, by the name of Hugh McCall.
At the point, it was Nations Bank.
Right.
And a guy with a great big vision of his city. And when I interviewed with him, Still not sure, but this was something completely different. I would have to take my
It was a
Rolodex.
city. It wasn't Union Square.
It wasn't Union Square. He was looking at a vision for a city. And I went up to this beautiful tower, now the Bank of America Tower, which sits right in the middle of Trade and Tryon at Charlotte. And there's no other building of its kind in the area. And my interview basically was walking around, I believe it was the 60th floor, looking out windows and him pointing out neighborhoods and being so detailed about what he had envisioned in terms of housing, a trolley, a light rail system, an arena, a cultural district. And I'm thinking to myself, what an opportunity. With all these cards in my hand, with Bank of America and the support I was going to get, to really have an impact and make a difference. And I got tremendous support there. It was a incredible run. I lived downtown. I lived in the historic district. I walked to work. We made a real difference. I attracted Johnson & Wales University, which was up in Rhode Island, and they were looking to consolidate.
Which is the preeminent hospitality.
Yeah, and they came, and it was booming. Charlotte was booming at the time.
And a little trolley and some other things,
yes,
right?
A couple
Light
of things.
rails.
Yeah.
And so what happens then? You're there a couple years, and you were missing New York?
9/11 happens. Pulled on all of our heartstrings, certainly mine. And
there's a new mayor in town.
I'm watching. I pick up my New York Times every day and read on my 2 pages or 1 page of what's happening and the new appointments taking place, and just sort of applauding it and saying, "Boy, this guy's doing great. He's really putting a team together."
But you never knew Mike. You didn't know that.
I didn't know him.
And you didn't know Dan Doctoroff. But
I had met Dan earlier, but I didn't know him well. But I got a call from Dan Doctoroff on a Monday when I was with the mayor of Charlotte, where we were planning on where we were going to put the Charlotte
the stadium, right?
And fast forward, I end up interviewing with the mayor the next day. That was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 1 o'clock the next day, I meet with the mayor. And I've said to you, I've said to other people.
Tell me about the meeting, because it was an interesting meeting. I think it's important, and it shows Mike and what he trusts on people and relationships.
Certainly how decisive he is. And I remember walking in, and I felt I wasn't catching his interest. And I remember him looking up and saying, "You're a bid expert. What would you do on Fordham Road?" And at that point, I was like, "Thank you, God."
Right.
Fordham Road, and I obviously knew it well and talked about how you need to get the anchor institutions like Fordham University involved, and if they got involved, you could line up all the small businesses. And
right, and the Sears over there that used to be on Fordham Road too.
Fordham and Webster. Fordham Webster, and also one on Fordham and Grand Concourse. And enough, he seemed satisfied. A wonderful thing happened during that interview. The door pops open and Ray Kelly walks in, and Ray Kelly had served as police commissioner in Dinkins administration. He says, "You're interviewing this guy? This is the guy who cleaned up Union Square." "Thank you, Police Commissioner Ray Kelly." The interview ends up soon after that. I'm on the steps. I'm about to call my wife saying I'm coming home. This is government. These things happen. Who knows how many other candidates they're talking about. Dan Doctoroff grabs me, had come running down the steps, brought me back up to meet with the mayor. The mayor sticks out his hand and says, "Say yes." Say yes. I'm thinking about my contract with Bank of America, Charlotte, moving, relocation, my wife's job, all these things.
Salary,
forgetting his salary, right? And I said yes.
So what was the job initially? Because, you spent 12 years. You've done a lot of things and accomplished a lot. But tell me about the job.
It was the Department of Business Services. And at the time, it was somewhat of a sleepy agency. It oversaw the Business Improvement District. It didn't have many business service programs. Department of Business Services. The mayor rightly, and Dan Doctoroff rightly, ended up saying, "We need to brand it so New Yorkers know that they could get services for small businesses." We had that arm that we grew bids, and we grew the program from
Right. When you went there, they were 44,
and now
then
there's over
70.
There's 70 now. There's 70. There might be 71, 72 now. But we got it up to 70 in the 12 years, which was big. And the focus, I'm quite proud of this, was the fact that we brought it to the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. If you look back at the bids, they, for the most part,
They were Manhattan-centric.
Manhattan-centric, Union Square, Times Square, Madison Square. And we ended up focusing on many of the small ones. So we really built out that neighborhood development component. The other piece that we did was we developed a lot of entrepreneurial programs for small businesses, whether it was veterans, whether it was small businesses, whether it was technology companies.
Like what type of entrepreneurial programs?
Well, this is the fascinating thing. We ended up going to the universities, NYU and Columbia. It was everything from putting a business plan together, developing a strategy. In some cases, it was, for some of the smaller businesses, the mom and pops that were just struggling with technology in terms of how to use technology to make your business better. Getting capital access, working with the banks to get capital access. Many small businesses have difficulty getting a loan from a traditional bank. What are the other alternative lenders, online lenders that you can end up going to make things happen? And we made some headway. We also, a year into the job, the mayor took the Department of Employment, basically blew it up. Said we could do better. We could place more New Yorkers in jobs, and we should be teaming up with libraries and putting them, throughout. We developed 17 centers. We placed hundreds of thousands of people in jobs at all different levels.
Now, these centers work with employment agencies in certain cases?
Well, we changed it, right? We changed it to, yes, nonprofit organizations.
Right.
But we also had for-profit entities. Why not? Why not have, put your best foot forward in helping New Yorkers that need jobs and make relationships, whether it was churches, whether it was public housing. When Barclays opened up, they came to us and said, we want you to do the hiring. Boy, this is going to be great. How powerful can this be?
So you did the hiring for the Barclays Center and the exhibits and the restaurants and everything?
Everything, the whole thing. We took over the whole hiring. But we did that for a lot of other smaller retailers and grocery stores and others that were growing in New York. And our proposition is we could save you time and money because we have a lot of people coming in and we'll screen them for you.
Now, what you did tell me that when you were in the Fellows Program, there was one of these students who, his name was Bill, right?
Yes, he was.
He had curly hair at that time, right?
Big, tall guy.
And he was in your program.
1984, 85. Warren, William, de Blasio, Wilhelm walked in the door. I remember my first conversation with him, and very curious and energetic, and came in, and he was part of that program. He came through.
So you didn't want to join his administration?
12 years was enough. I think anyone who is, it's amazing the sacrifices your family makes, your kids make.
I mean, because, it's the administration, you weren't there at 9/11, but you were there of the 3 fire engines that were given
by Bank of America.
By Bank of America. And then you were there during Sandy.
I thought I was going to leave the last year early. That would have been a smarter career move in many ways, just sort of leverage out. And a number of people did that. I felt, quite frankly, obligated after
Sandy.
After October 29th. And going out to Red Hook and the Rockaways and the South Shore of Staten Island and other places, we didn't get the federal loans until the following May. You would look into the eyes of a lot of these small businesses, and they lost everything. Out in Breezy Point, hundreds of homes, and organizations needed to be built up and needed to be strengthened. And I, basically worked around the clock to try to do my best in helping a lot of these businesses get loans. I got a lot of help from the outside, whether it was Goldman Sachs, or Citibank, or the Mayor's Fund, building, storefronts, putting organizations, and quite frankly, I felt at my best then.
How do you get to Baruch?
Well, I got a call from Dean David Birdsall. Baruch has the biggest School of Public Affairs in the country. Amazing students and faculty there, right here in the heart of Manhattan.
Not far from the old bid.
Not far from the old bid in the old neighborhood, and it was just something. I liked building careers when I was at Small Business Services. This was going to be different, teaching on a graduate level and undergraduate level, and talking about building cities and urban economic development and taking it from a different perspective. I like to take my students out on the streets, into neighborhoods. I explore current issues.
Now you were telling me you're going to do something with the Executive MBA. What's this?
The Executive Masters in Public Administration program. I oversee that program now. This is a program where middle managers come back to become senior managers, and we have a great track record on that. I'll teach a 5-week course where it's just an intensive course on the city. Shaping parks, the innovation and creativity that's taking place in places like Roosevelt Island or Governor's Island or Brooklyn Bridge Park, and then other complications that neighborhoods go through. Who are the stakeholders? How do you bring people together? How do you put a business improvement district? How do you take advantage of incentives?
Let's talk about family.
My wife is wonderful. We have been married 14 years. She runs an organization called Exploring the Arts, which is Tony and Susan Bennett's foundation. She's in high schools throughout the city, helping them with performing and visual arts, and has wonderful programs.
And you have an older daughter.
I have an older daughter who's at Loyola.
And her name?
Kara Walsh. And she's studying global studies. She's a junior and doing quite well.
And the little guy?
My little guy's a baseball player.
Right, we have pictures, with Grandpa at Cyclone Field.
Yes, he got to throw out the first pitch with his grandfather.
Where does he go to school?
He goes to Poly Prep in Brooklyn.
And now you're back in Brooklyn also, right?
We are. We're in Carroll Gardens.
And what's also interesting is that, you have a part-time with my good friends, Tim King and Brian.
Tim King and Brian.
At CPEC, and you're at 81 Willoughby in a building that...
The building is the building where CPEC's real estate is where my mom had her first job.
Right.
And my dad would meet her on those steps, and they'd go to the movies at Fulton Mall. It's amazing how connections are made in New York City, aren't they?
And I'm happy that we've had a connection because both of us are on 10-10 wins.
I love that.
Okay. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.